If it works.
We are live and we are successful as of yet in this endeavor. Okay. Oh my God. Happy self-care Sunday, Zeph, by the way.
Happy self-care Sunday to you too. Self-care is like every day for me.
I know, right?
It's the whole thing.
I had like I had to have like my own like unraveling of that, because what ended up happening was like, obviously I started doing this show and then it's like work a little bit on Sundays, but it doesn't feel like work, obviously,
Right.
but I'm working and it's kind of like, oh, but I have to then make sure I get my self-care in on Sundays. It's like, what the hell does that even mean? I get my self-care in as a mom, where I can, like
Right.
when I see the pockets of time.
Right. Because I mean, for me, like self-care, like is like little habits. There's little habits that you build into your day that become practices.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be unique to you as well, right? So we'll get more into that. But I just wanted to give people a couple seconds to like hop in. If you're joining us live, say hello. We're live on StreamYard. So if you're listening and you feel like you want to say hello to us or something resonates with you, you can give it permission to send that comment over to us and we'll see it. But I'm going to pop in on Facebook right now and I'm going to tag Zephyr in our live. So while I'm doing that, how are you doing today, Zeph? Like, how you feeling?
I feel like time no longer has any fucking meaning at all. Oh, by the way, is there exuberant language allowed? Because I cuss like a sailor.
Yeah. There's language allowed.
Okay, just checking. Because sometimes I know that there are people like, I have kids that listen to this and I'm like, but really, in about 2 years, they're going to learn about this shit anyway. So what's it matter?
Exactly.
So I'm learning that time doesn't really matter anymore. And so now I'm like, maybe I'm like 10 minutes into something and I think it's like 6 hours, or like I'm 6 hours into something and thinking it's 3 minutes. And so now life and like time has no damn meaning.
Yeah. Well, isn't that a part of our COVID awakening here? I mean, I keep talking about this with people. It's like, oh yeah, like this has been an experience for all of us souls here. Like, wow.
100.
Right. Anyway, yeah, you're tagged and we're good to go.
Beautiful.
So yeah, just real quick, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for being my friend. This is Zeph Williams, everybody who's listening. And he's going to school us today. He's going to school us on a couple topics, but we're going to, as usual, these conversations are unscripted and we're just going to kind of have these, spiritual and philosophical conversations that are sometimes, especially given that I'm focused on spiritual self-care this month, these topics and these conversations, I don't feel like are had enough, because it's like this discomfort that I think a lot of people have with going into like deep conversations. And sometimes it's viewed as like a waste of time to like go into the meaning of things and to kind of pause and really take inventory and let your curiosities like play off of each other and stuff. So I want to thank you for being the type of person that you are, that you were like meant to have this conversation with me this month, because I know that these conversations are important to you too. So Zeph is my friend. We have mutual friends out in Jersey City. You've been an inspiration to me, and I want you to tell us a little bit about you and what you do, but how you also like got into the space that you're in as well.
Beautiful. So, these are great questions. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I always love talking about all kinds of things, especially when I just get to open my mouth and let things come out, because Lord knows I love talk. So my name is Zeph, and my pronouns are any and no, which means that you can use any or no pronouns when you're referring to me, so long as it's with respect. If it's with disrespect, we're gonna have a conversation on like, how do you respect somebody's gender. And so for me, I'm a multitude of things. So in my day job, my like quote unquote 9 to 5 job, it's really not 9 to 5. It's whenever I decide to show up for like the hours I need to show up for. I work in prison abolition spaces, and people usually get a little scared, confused about prison abolition. They're like, oh, that means you're just going to let everybody out. I'm like, no, let's pause, take a beat. It's really not about that. It's about recognizing and honoring that, everybody has a story, and we don't always know everybody's story, but we also need to recognize that the way that society has been built and the way that we look at community buildings and the way that we look at communities, they're not healing. They're not providing equity. They're not providing access to resources, or access to just like basic healthcare, or access to employment, or access to, just any number of things that allow us to live into our highest and brightest self. And so with the prison abolition work, a lot of what I'm doing is building these communities and building these alternatives and building these options in order for us to all live safely, equitably, and fully into ourselves. And it's really beautiful that I'm doing this as my day job, because this is kind of how I'm transitioning into my other business that I'm building right now called House of Zeph. And House of Zeph is kind of like a life hosting. Life coaching kind of gets on my nerves a little bit, because life coaching, it just, I don't know, there's just something about that phrase that really grates me, but I call it life hosting. So with House of Zeph, it's about allowing me to invite you into where I feel brave and where I feel safe. And creating this space where you can also feel that for yourself and determine, how do I build my own house of safety? How do I build my own house of security, my own house of comfort? Because safety and security and comfort, they're all different concepts, and they all mean different things to different people. And to that say, it's like, I can't even build that safe space for you. I can build a safer space. I think that you need to figure out what that safe space looks like for you on your own terms with the tools that are available to you. And so with this life hosting, it's me providing those tools so that way you know how to empower yourself. Because I think that with empowerment, it's not something that somebody can do for you. I think that somebody can provide you the guidance to empowerment, but you have to make that conscious choice to step into your own empowerment. Because otherwise, that other person, there's now a power differential there, where that other person who you quote unquote said empowers you, now you're going to always be looking to that person whenever you need to make a decision, or whenever you need advice, or whenever like anything that you need, or you feel like there's a deficit or lack, you're going to look to that person to provide that empowerment. And it's like, okay, well, how's that going to work if we're trying to build these spaces where people can feel into their highest and brightest self? You can't. So let's provide those tools and let you make that choice and what that looks like for you. And so I do this through a variety of different ways. So I'm working on getting my Reiki training. I have level 1. I'm working on getting level 2 next. I'm a registered yoga teacher. I do tarot readings. I'm also into astrology and natal charts. So it's bringing a lot of different healing modalities to make sure that we can kind of understand the fullness of you and really try to work with you on how do you understand yourself? What are the things what are the tools that you can use to understand yourself?
Right. Oh, I think if it's
a
not
lot.
clear. No. I mean, it quite honestly, I'm a lot over here too. Like, and I like, we were just like comparing our shirts before. Obviously I'm sporting my self-care as my job top. And the still learning. Like I am, it's like resonating with me right now so much, because it's like, I'm a lot, you're like, oh, there's a lot to explain. I'm a lot over here too. And the reason I think is because this is a process even within us. Like we can, so I love that you mentioned the concept that word coach, or the concept of life coaching is like a little, it's going to sit well with some people and not so well with others. It's going to be an individual thing, but I so resonate with that. And I mean, I tend to forget to introduce myself on this show because I just assume that like everybody knows, but hi, I'm Samantha Long and I'm a self-care mentor for women, and I'm also a yoga instructor. So there's a reason that I started to use the term mentor, and sometimes I use the word guide and less using the word coach. And it's so spot on to what you said and how we're so aligned in our vision, in the fact that it can't be about what I'm it can't be only about what I'm either telling you to do or empowering you to do or insisting worse that you do, right? It has to be about instilling a sense of self-coaching within someone that they can take with them and through the rest of their lives. And it's sometimes, and in that healing we were talking about too, it's like you find that through one of several modalities of healing. You need to reconnect to yourself, and if we can be a guide to do that, that's what gets you where you need to go, not necessarily like taking these like nuggets and trying to force them into some kind of self-care practice of your own. And I'm always talking about that, right? I cannot tell you. So actually maybe we can go into this. I cannot tell you how many people, since we're so aligned in how we feel it's so important to have a self-care practice. Like, I cannot tell you how many people, specifically women, I don't know if it's, something to do with our feminine, inequalities, and sometimes like, conditioning and such, but many women, and often men too, will tell me that, what is self-care? Like they will literally be like, please tell me what the fuck that is.
Right.
Like, almost like it's still a buzzword and it's that much of a disconnection to the concept, and then sometimes it's, assumed and kind of sold to us as one thing when really it should be another. So what does it mean to you?
Well, and I'll take a little bit of a step back too, because I think that the reason why, and what I believe that the reason why most people don't understand what self-care is because we're raised in a society that teaches you that you are valuable based on what you do, not because of who you are. And so I think that's that reason why that self-care thing is really, really difficult to manage and to really like understand, is because we are taught that the only value we have is in the labor that we can produce.
Mm.
And, that's why we have the 9-to-5 job. That's why we're structured. And that's why we believe in quote unquote professionalism. That's why we always have to constantly strive for that quote unquote fucking American dream, which is like two and a half kids, a dog, and a white picket fence. Well, fuck all of that, because I don't want any of that shit. Like, I just don't want it. And it's taken me a long time to kind of really dismantle what that means and how do I show up and how do I perpetuate that. And we can talk about this in a minute, but for me, like self-care, I actually have this thing called it's a self-care compass. It's no, what is it? Is it? I think it is a self-care compass. Yeah, it's a self-care compass. And it really guides you through the heart, body, mind, and soul. So it really asks you some really like poignant questions on like, how are these things showing up? What does this mean for you? Da, 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 da. But for me, self-care is it's really intentional and deliberate small habits that you can build into a practice where you're taking care of yourself. And a lot of people get lost in this, oh, well, it's a bubble bath, or it's wine, or it's going out to do these things. That it's whatever like these big ideas are. And it's really like, no, what brings you joy and pleasure in your life? If it's 3 seconds of joy and pleasure, that's a self-care practice. If you can carve out 3 seconds of your day and make that a very intentional practice, that 3 seconds is a self-care practice. So if it is just sitting in meditation for 5 minutes, that is a self-care practice. If it is calling up a friend and saying, hey, can we talk for 2 minutes? That's a self-care practice. And it can be anything from like 3 seconds to an hour, whatever the hell it looks like. It's taking care of yourself and taking care of your needs and your desires. But I think that, and part of the reason why it's so hard is because we don't really know how to language what our needs and desires are either. Because we're often taught that what we need and what we desire are not real, or that we don't deserve them. It's really rooted in this idea of deservingness and worthiness. And it's like, but really, why do we keep telling people they're not deserving of care, why they're not worthy of care? And I think COVID has kind of flipped this on its head a little bit. And that's because COVID really allowed us time to sit down and go, all right, so I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm feeling really anxious. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. And then finally it was like, we got a chance to sit in those, like that, in the shit of our feelings and really go, how do I navigate this? What does this look like? And I think that's why self-care has become this really hot button item, is because we finally got a moment to sit down and go, oh God, my life feels really fucked up right now. How do I change this? And it's by taking care of yourself and realizing that you have value and that you are deserving because you are.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important because you just nailed it. The fact that we are taught that not only is our productivity dependent on what we're producing and how much, like it's very qualitative, or not qualitative, it's more quantitative, in fact, like how more do create, produce, go. It's a very like masculine energy, and there is a time and a space for that. But I do feel like, and this will kind of lead us into our gender discussion and that energy concept too, eventually. But it's like, there's a time and a space for that. Yes. Like if you're starting a business, or if you're, in the midst of like a major life transition, I think that there's a time and a space for that, like giving yourself an extra push here and there. But yes, COVID as an experience has gotten us to a point where we had no choice but to go the fuck home and sit the fuck down and start thinking about the shit that you've been avoiding thinking about for a long time. And what comes out of that is a sense of self-awareness, because you're finally becoming really fully aware of the pieces that like comprise, like, why do I have this physical tension? Why do I have this emotional tension? Whatever it is, why is this why do I have this repeating pattern that I'm going through? That it's like, and sometimes we just embody that because that's what we're told to do. We just take it on as a whole personality. Well, that's just how I am, But until you sit and actually go through those feelings and emotions and sit in that discomfort, we're also told as an add-on, that discomfort itself is just bad. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, avoid all discomfort and only strive for those, sort of external factors that are going to make us feel good momentarily, and the more and whatever it is. Or the, sort of luxury self-care practices like having bubble baths and massages and wines and all of that stuff, or food, right? Like those are your pleasureful moments, and then the uncomfortable moments are bad. Let's avoid
Right.
those at all costs. But we're here to tell you, it's like this is a perfect example. The COVID experience is like that discomfort. Out of that discomfort breeds self-awareness, and through self-awareness and taking pause, taking inventory, really going inside for, it doesn't have to be for a year.
Right.
It probably didn't even need to be a year, right? Some
Right.
people it takes a year. But it's like, yeah, we need to have that pause. We reconnect with ourselves.
Right.
And it's a spiritual experience, because that connection to self can come out of like that taking inventory and really actually, paying closer attention to what we want and what we really, really need versus but what we're told we're supposed to be doing,
Right. And I think for your listeners too, like the thing that I'm thinking of is like when we're sitting here with these very unpleasant emotions, like I like to use pleasant versus unpleasant because then it feels very neutral. But when you're sitting in these unpleasant emotions and you're trying to avoid them, I would grab a notebook personally and journal. What am I afraid of? What is causing me anxiety in this moment that I don't want to confront this? What is it here? And if that feels very big and that feels very uncomfortable for you and you feel, unsafe, for like, if you don't feel secure in your own body, my friend Kara Kovacs, who is a great like life coach herself, she has this thing called resourcing, where it's finding a space of security either within yourself or somewhere around you. And what you can do is you can sit in a comfortable seating position, right, when you're feeling this way. And you can just look inside of yourself and somewhere inside of you for where you feel safe. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you focus on your heart chakra. I figured out that there's a correct way to say this. And so now I'm trying to be mindful of what I say about this, but chakra. So heart chakra, your solar plexus, like look for something inside of you that feels safe for you. And if your body, and if you're not connected enough to your body to feel what feels safe, grab a pillow, grab a blanket. One thing I like to do before I wasn't feeling so safe in my body was I would actually just roll my hands, like starting with my pinky, and just roll them down on the ground and feeling that connect with the earth and resourcing into the ground and making sure that I can feel that, because that's stable, that's secure. And using that as a place for when my mind starts to wander, I can go, all right, this is reminding me of the present moment. Oh, okay, I'm safe. I'm calm. I've got this. I'm okay. I'm safe right here, right now. And then that allows those uncomfortable emotions to come forth. And you can go, all right, here's where I'm feeling unsafe and uncomfortable. This is the memories that are tied to this. Here are the emotions and here are the sensations. Because I think that when we have these emotions, it's really critical to also notice what are the sensations that are coming up, because sometimes you're not going to notice your emotions first. You're going to notice your sensations. So is your face flushed? Is your throat feeling very constricted? Are you getting chills? Are you starting to sweat? Like, is your heart beating really fast? Because those are really key signal moments for you to go, all right, maybe this heart racing is anxiety, or maybe this heart racing is actually fear. And they can always be different things. They can also be a combination of them, because we do not have the emotional range of a teaspoon. Our emotions, we can feel at least 6 different emotions in a single second. And so that resourcing thing is really critical, I think, for like landing in your body, landing in this present moment and going, okay, I am safe. Let's explore what this emotion is and how this is showing up. Because when you do that, then you can start looking at, really understanding what the root of self-care is. And that's taking care of yourself and honoring your body and honoring your needs.
Honoring, exactly. I was just going to say, it comes back to that question that we get from people sometimes, like, what the fuck is self-care in the first place? It's because, and I think that concept can be daunting to people because you're making it like it has to be this big daunting concept, and like you have to do big things, again aligned with kind of like how we're taught that things need to go, right?
Right.
But it isn't. It's granular. So you are like doing small things like, okay, I'm just noticing that I feel an anxiety. I feel an anxiety, and it could be because of lack of security, like you were saying. Like I do that too, where I'll do little simple grounding practices where it's just like, okay, all I really need to do is sit in a cross-legged position on the floor and try to really release my whole root chakra down, like my whole, for our listeners, like your entire foundation of where your booty and, you're between your and your as I like to say. um just let that shit go and let
Right.
yourself connect to the earth. And it's like, and this could be something that works for a certain person or it could not, but it's little things that you're going to find that are, whether it's a pillow or whatever it is, anything that's going to make you feel secure without judgment. You do that thing.
Right.
You do not judge yourself for needing it. You do not judge yourself for feeling the thing that you need to now find a way to soothe. There's no judgment. It is literally figuring out what little granular things you can do one at a time. And it's not like some big approach or gesture. It's starting small in those little ways to soothe ourselves, and then I think the bigger messages come from there, from creating a like you said, resourcing, creating that comfort for ourselves so that we can eventually move beyond. And the only other thing that I'll say about that process is that it does take time to find your own mode of, okay, what really is going to be your like go-to brand of self-care, like what's going to be your
Right.
routine, at least for that season in your life, like at least for that time, because the same thing isn't going to work for like for eternity for you. You're going to
Right.
have to find new ways to prioritize yourself and to take care of yourself as you go on. But patience, I think, is really key too. And it's another thing that it's very simply becoming aware that we're just also not very not conditioned well to be patient. We want instant gratification. So it's like that non-judgment and that patience piece comes in. So it's so important because we're just not used to, we're used to reacting when something doesn't just click right away. And
Right.
normally that reaction is to judge ourselves.
Right. Well, and the thing is too, like self-care can also be ritualized practices. And I think that sometimes people feel very scared about, oh, I don't know if I'm doing self-care right. I can guarantee that most of y'all are already probably doing this. If we reframe this as ritualized practices, when you brush your teeth in the morning, you're taking 2 to 3 minutes to brush your teeth. For me, that is a self-care practice because you're taking care of your body. And so if you can focus on just brushing your teeth and like really release any of those thoughts coming in from your past or any mistakes you've made, and release the anxiety from the future stuff and really focus in on this present moment, 2 minutes while you're brushing your teeth, that's a self-care practice. For me in the mornings when I get up, I do this every morning. I meditate for about 5 minutes. There's no typing, no talking, no texting for the first 5 minutes. Then I open into a gratitude practice. Then I go outside, do some grounding for like 30 seconds. Then I come back in and do some more yoga and meditation. And that's kind of how I start my every morning, as kind of like a self-care kind of thing. But, it's these little things where you can just be mindful and intentional about how you are moving in the world. Just like whether it's brushing your teeth, maybe when you're eating breakfast, just paying attention to what you're eating and noticing how you're nourishing your body. That's a small self-care practice. And like putting away the newspaper or something whenever you're doing this, but really just focus on what you're eating. Or, even journaling is a good self-care practice. These are small little things. They don't have to be these big grandiose things, because I feel like self-care has gotten very commercialized. And so you can just take it back and go, how can I uncommercialize it? What am I already doing in my life that feels like a self-care practice where I'm taking care of myself? And really just evaluating what really not even evaluate, just, pausing to check in. Where are the ways in which I'm already doing self-care?
Yeah, exactly. Because people are doing it. It's just like we tend to try to find these ways in which we're not enough. So like it's triggering. It's like, okay, well, what's your self-care routine?
Right.
And it's like, oh, you're right. Like I'm not doing enough. No, you are like you probably are, and like celebrate what you are doing. And as a way to practice non-judgment so that you can get to that place where you're like more comfortable saying, what else do I need? Like perhaps what else do I need? I
And I
think
love that you celebrate here, like celebrating what you need, because that is a huge thing. Like I do this thing called Favorite Fridays every Friday on my Instagram live, where I just bring people in to celebrate what they're great at. And if anybody wants to do it, I have a link in my Instagram bio. It's at Zephy. And it's just a moment, it's just an hour where we can celebrate you. Because I think that's a big piece of self-care and this deserving and this worthiness. We focus so much on where we're not great or where we're failing. Where can we focus on those things that we're doing well? How can we celebrate ourselves? And I love that you brought this up, because that is something we do not talk about enough, is celebrating ourselves for just how fucking amazing we are, just for being us right here, right now.
Yeah. It's very much a focus on the lack and what we're missing, the parts of us that we need to improve, or like how we're supposed to be. All of those concepts are all intertwined. And we're sadly, because of the society we live in, it is not, again, we're not here to bitch and complain about it. I'm not here to give negative energy to about it, or commute, anger about it. It's just, it is what it is. And we are, the way that we end up getting the tendency that comes from that is to always feel like we need to be doing more and more and more. But the reality is that absolutely, we're all fucking special as fuck.
Right. 100%.
And we're all doing the best we can, and then some, probably, to be quite honest with you, because life ain't easy. And we probably do way more than anyone would have ever expected possible, but it's true that, we just have to kind of, we literally break down that by actually starting to celebrate. One of the affirmations that I've been repeating to myself lately is, everything you're doing is working. Because I'll come in, that little inner critic will come in, right, and be like, and everything I'm doing is working. Look what you've created. Like, look what's happening now. Look at this beautiful show that I've been that I totally manifested. I kid you not. Self-care is my job. The title itself just planted itself in my one day. And then you just little, shifts and changes, and little piece by piece, you can manifest something that is like, that's a celebration. Even if it's the tiniest little shift, it's like an amazing accomplishment, actually. Right. So this, and I think that in itself is a way to bring our conversation to the concept of spiritual self-care, and like coming into that sort of spiritual aspect, because the concept spiritual, I think, again, it has like different meaning for everybody. Sometimes it's triggering. Sometimes it's like, what does that even mean? And sometimes you're talking with somebody who's very spiritual, who's very connected to themselves, and it resonates. For me, it's like, this is what I was just talking about on the last episode. For whoever's watching, if you didn't catch it, did a solo episode just about the concept of spirituality, and how not only is it about connection to ourselves, but potentially connection to something bigger.
Right.
So you were talking to me, and I think this is so important, especially closing out like this series that I'm in, Mind, Body, Spirit. Why do we hear about this all the time? It's because the idea is to integrate, to align, is to come to a place where we're like single, you could say single-minded or single-pathed, because if mind, body, and spirit, if it's all on the same page, life gets a little bit lighter and a little bit easier. But if we're told to be one way and we're striving for that, but our insides are telling us we're a different way, and we're hiding that, or, sort of attempt, and the attempt at that integration is so uncomfortable. And then you add in the piece of that, running from the discomfort. So I know you know what I'm talking about. So please tell me what your perspective on this.
So like spirituality, I have this phrase that I use all the time. It's called, when I belong to me, I belong to we. It's huge. I know it's huge. And for me, because the spiritual journey starts with yourself, and it starts with realizing that you are a part of something bigger. And then it starts branching out. Okay, well, how do I carry myself in this world? What are the ways in which I see, I'm already starting to cry and thinking about crying, because it's like, this kind of stuff just makes me feel so blessed and so grateful to be sharing. And like, it fills me with a great sense of joy and a great sense of pleasure. Because for me, when I'm thinking about spirituality, it starts with yourself. How are you showing up in the world? And not only showing up in the world, for other people, how are you showing up for yourself? What are the ways in which you can love yourself first? What are the ways in which you can, check in with your actions, your behaviors, your responses to things? How are you responding, not reacting to things? what are the ways, like, just basically, how can you show up as the highest and brightest version of yourself? Because I believe in this one consciousness idea, like we're all part of this one consciousness. So every action that I have and every action I take towards myself is going to directly impact somebody else. And so when I'm belonging to myself as the fullest version of myself, and I'm living into my values, I'm living into my truth, and I am powering up myself, I'm already doing it for everybody else too. Mm-hmm. And that the way in which I live my truth also allows other people to figure out how they can live their own. And so for me, spirituality is something that is just much bigger than just my day-to-day actions. It's every piece of me. It shows up in the way that I work. It shows up in the way that I have relationships with other people. It shows up in the way that I take care of myself. It shows up in just, you know, even just how I'm even having this conversation with you. So spirituality is this very big thing, and it feels very big, but for me, it also feels very small because I can see both the vastness of it and also the ways that it applies just to me personally. Yeah, I think, and I know that feels big, and it is big. I don't really know.
Yeah, but we can think of it as like this giant, big fucking bear hug. Like it's right. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of big. It's like cozy big, right? You know, because it's about connection. It's not about polarizing. It's not about, you know, me having my own see, this is where I think it gets, you know, funky, is because it's like, it's not about me having my own very specific spiritual belief that might be different than yours. Right. I mean, whatever, it could be, but in reality, the concept is that the connection, right. If you take, like you were saying, you take care of yourself, you prioritize yourself, you are connected to you, you know, I'm connected to me, therefore I'm connected to we. I love that. Right. So
well, and I think also, like, even with these vast, like, spiritual beliefs, and like everybody has their vast ones, what are they rooted in? Because like, we can have these different beliefs, and if they're rooted in connection, and I think it goes deeper than that, because I think I'm also getting into A Course in Miracles right now, so this is the whole other thing. But I think that, like, when we look at connection, what the real root of connection is love. So if we're all connected and rooted through love, that means that we can have all these different beliefs, because through love, we can have compassionate understanding and grace for everybody else and where they're at in their journey.
Right. Absolutely. I was just saying this the other day in my previous episode. It's like, if I am connected, if I have a spiritual, you know, self-care practice, or if I have some kind of mode of spirituality that I'm into, it's going to connect me more to myself. And if I'm connected more to myself, I have less judgment toward everyone else, because right. I am not worried about what you're doing. You know what I mean? I'm all up in me. I'm all up in me. So if I have less judgment as far as what everybody else should be doing or shouldn't be doing and blah, 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 then what comes in, because we are originally rooted in love, and that's our natural way. So if I get rid of all that judgment, what comes in is love, compassion, and empathy. And so now I can see you as a true human being. I can see your true essence. I'm not worried about what you can offer me, what you've done to me, you know, ways that you can help me or whatever. I just see you, right? And if we get to that place, like that place of non-judgment, once again, you know, of course, there's always going to be a concept that I come back to a million times, but it's like, we need that. We need to eliminate all those little judgments and find the connection. I also think it's incredibly important to note that connection, once we see our connection to each other in that way, we have, it's like, I've lost my train of thought. So no, it's like the opposite of loneliness. Right. So we feel connected to each other. I think when we eliminate loneliness, we can eliminate depression. We can eliminate, or we can, you know, we can minimize depression. We can minimize things like addiction, because we feel we can eliminate loneliness. I mean, you know, having, you know, a lot of that in my relationships in my life, that's becoming more and more clear to me. Whereas like before, there was a lot of judgment even around, you know, we're getting to a place where mental health and mental illness is becoming destigmatized, which is amazing. But I actually think that these conversations about spiritual health will even further normalize the concept that we need to feel connected to each other, and then that actually helps in the mental health realm as well.
Well, and I love that where you're going, because you're talking about I see you, like kind of understanding people where they're at right now in this present moment, and then you're talking about the ways that we can destabilize these paradigms of things that we don't understand, because I think that moves us from I see you to I know you. Mm-hmm. And when you go from I see to I know, that means you can actually see the totality of who they are, versus just kind of saying, all right, I see you in this present moment. That's cool. Let's have a conversation, because now you're getting like, oh, I see you. I know you. I understand you, because you are me and you're a reflection of me. Every action and behavior that I have is a reflection of you. And this is how, like, and that goes back to this one consciousness of I belong to me, I belong to you, because now you're trying to shift these paradigms. And I think this is actually the perfect way to start actually segueing into gender, because I think that, you know, when we're looking at trans and non-binary people, we're the ones, and for people listening at home, I kind of fall under that umbrella. I see it a little bit different for me, because my gender is very liberated. I see my gender as flowing like water. I ebb and flow with masculine and feminine energy, depending on the time of day, depending on the second. Like, there's shifts in my energy. You can tell it. Like, I don't subscribe to this idea that our genitalia defines our gender. It just doesn't work like that. Those are just biological markers of this is how I can procreate if I choose to fucking do it. And since I'm not, whatever, doesn't matter. But gender is something that's deeply personal, something that belongs to all of us, and we all get to choose. And for trans and gender non-conforming people, we are shifting this paradigm of gender, because when you look at us, we are challenging your idea of what is normal. We are challenging the idea, and it's like, well, fuck your idea of normal, because trans and gender non-conforming people have been around forever. The problem is now there's more of us who are being visible, which means that now we are languaging what gender looks like. We are creating new language. We're not even creating, we're pioneering new language in what trans and gender non-conforming looks like. And people are like, well, he and she have been like these paradigms, these constructs that we've used forever, because they're comfortable and they allow us to kind of label and put things on people. And when you can't label and you can't decide that this is who you are, it feels very uncomfortable and it feels very scary. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what and that's exactly where I think, you know, and that's kind of where I think the trans and gender non-conforming people are, is like, we're asking you, how can you be less scared? Yeah. Look at me. I'm still a fucking human being. See me, know me, understand me. Because when you see and know me and understand you, you get to see a greater slice of humanity. Because I think that's the thing, is when you have people, you know, when you have people who are outside the white cis heteropatriarchy. Now, I know it's a big concept, but cis means basically that you identify with the sex that you were born at birth. White, of course, white's always been the paradigm. Hetero meaning, you know, is opposite gender loving, and then just patriarchy is like it's male dominated society. So anybody who's not a white cisgendered male doesn't really have any power or privilege. It doesn't really exist. And yes, there's different degrees of power and privilege, and this is not the oppression Olympics. You have your traumas, I have my traumas. It doesn't mean that anybody suffers more or less. We all kind of operate through those traumas in our own, through those trauma experiences, our own ways, kind of move through this with the tools and resources we have. But, you know, when you are somebody who, say, is a woman or a black woman or a black trans woman, you know, as we get deeper down these intersectionalities of identities, then you start seeing more and more and more and more and more of the full scope of humanity. And so when you start paying attention and going and start realizing that, again, back to that reflection conversation, you start seeing pieces of yourself reflected in, because maybe there's a piece of them that you maybe want to explore, but you haven't really had the opportunity to, because you felt scared, because you didn't know that was something you could access. Mm-hmm. And so it's when you start seeing all these people and you start looking at the reflections of people like me and other people who do not hold your identities, you can go, maybe I need to pause and think about how I think about these things, and show up with a little bit of respect and show up with a little bit of love.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm literally sitting here listening to you and going, I'm going to listen to this episode like 7 times on my own, and like,
and I dive right
and quick. Just like let it all just like sink in and like see what comes out. Like, it's so good. Because honestly, I don't want to say resistant, but I think that there was like a little bit of a block for me up until recently. Just now, as a woman, obviously, I'm going to get a lot of like people in my tribe that are going to be talking about like the feminine, right? The divine feminine. That's been like a concept that's been floating around for years in my tribe of like women wellness people that I've been just, you know, blessed, quite honestly, to build. And there was a little bit of a block for me until very recently with the concept of like masculine and feminine energy. I just don't think I was able to grasp the really big picture of it all. Okay.
Right.
So I love this because and as of recently, it's been like hitting me in the face, like everywhere I go, where it's like I can't get away from this concept and I'm so ready to dig into it. It's filling me up to a level that's like things are starting to make sense, you know? And so for me, I don't want to take too much away from like your time to like school us on this because that was amazing and like
I try to give the big
said,
picture
like
view, so that way there's some like big picture shit that people can start diving into and thinking,
exactly.
here's how we can, here's my little avenues, my little doorways for me to start peeking into this.
Right, exactly. And it's like it's allowing for that curiosity too. So I love that we're having this conversation because it will pique an interest or a curiosity. Well, I was curious about how that works, that whole thing, and then you can go down that rabbit hole on your own. But
Right.
it is a very interesting concept, the fact that I like it what comes up for me is that we live in a society that really promotes the mindset of black and white, and that gray area is very uncomfortable for people sometimes. So basically we all have the both feminine and and masculine energy, and it's and there's a time and a space for all of it. It's
Right.
just that. And so really gender is actually kind of separate from that. It's like not, it doesn't have to be where it's like, oh well, I'm like, super masculine male, or I'm a feminine male. That doesn't even make sense either. Like, you know
Right.
what I mean? It's like we need both. So get comfortable. I think that's all I want to add, right? Is like get comfortable with the fact that there is this gray area. It's just simply that yes, we live in a patriarchal society that has painted a picture of how things are supposed to be. And I will invite people to start to question those concepts, because just because you were given a roadmap doesn't mean that that's like your path, that's your map,
Right.
right? Um, so the other thing that I wanted to ask you to kind of give us some insight on, because I would imagine that your journey of that integration, not, like that coming later, right? Like just that awareness at first of like, I need to get aligned with who I really have always been versus what I'm
Right.
told I'm supposed to be. That process of self-awareness, awakening, integration, the coming out process. I don't even know if we use that phrase anymore.
Right.
But
I feel like
what
we're
does
always in a
it
process
feel
of coming
like?
out and undiscovering ourselves. Like it's always, I think all of us are coming out at any given moment of the
Yes.
day.
That's kind of that's my thought process with it too, and why I brought it up to you. I'm like, like it's crazy because it's all to varying levels and based on their own individual things that are happening for you. But there is this coming out process when you decide that you are going to unlearn all of the things that you were told in that supposed
Right.
to field and start to completely embody who you've always meant to be,
Right.
been meant to be.
Well, and I will take it a step back too, because when you were asking these questions for people to consider, I also question, why do we have to gender certain things? Why do clothes have a gender when they're a piece of fucking fabric? Because I'm going to wear my 6-inch stilettos and you better watch the fuck out, because I love these things. I will wear my dresses. I will wear my makeup. I will do all of those things whenever the fuck I want, however I want.
Mhm.
I invite people to question, like, why do we have to gender clothing? It is
Yeah.
a fabric.
Yeah.
But
Ridiculous.
and to your point about coming out, I almost see it as a coming home. Like I'm coming home to myself, because I feel like a lot of times when we have this disconnect from our bodies, we kind of lose sight of where our security and where our comfort is, which means that we are no longer at home in our own bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we reinvite ourselves back home? How do we come home to ourselves where we can feel safe and we can furnish it, we can design it with all the things that make us great, and how do we like really, create this space where we feel safe, where we can invite people in, and we can invite people in for like just events and parties and fun times, where we can invite people in for the darkest moments too, because we can't have that light without the shadow. I fully believe that we can, like, their shadow pieces, yes, they're so super important, and we cannot just reject them because they feel very unpleasant. But for me, this coming home, so I have been struggling with, we all have trauma experiences, and I've had my fair share, and it doesn't make mine any more traumatizing or any less traumatizing than anybody else's. We all have our own journeys, and we all kind of process and work through them in our own different ways. And it doesn't mean that somebody's stronger than another because they were able to get through it better. It just might mean they may have had more access to resources. They may have had access to more privilege in order to navigate it. And plus, like, we all deal with emotions in a different way. So, like, I mean, have a little grace for people. So for me, like, I lost my parents when I was like 19, 20. I can't remember exactly how many, like, I forget how old I fucking am, like, all the damn time. So I lost my parents when I was really young. You know, I was dealing with just a lot of trauma and things. And I basically, like, my soul just left my body for like a good 15 years. Like, it just was like, you know what? I don't feel like being here anymore. I'm going to piece the fuck out. Like, and so I just wandered through life, just kind of figuring out, like, I don't feel connected anywhere. I have no connection to myself. I have no connection to community. I have no connection to this earthly fucking plane. I struggle with suicide. I actually have, if y'all have never heard of the semicolon project, which is about, like, your life is not a period, your life is a semicolon. There's things that come after. I struggled with suicide ideation for about 10 years. So every day, and there's drugs, there's pills, there's alcohol, there's all kinds of things in order to, like, really deal with that trauma, because at that time I didn't really have a lot of community supports. My first adult relationships were actually Michael, Billy, and Matt, and, you know, our mutual friends. They were kind of my first adult friends, and, you know, and a lot of this trauma has resulted in me not having a lot of memories from before I was 25. Like, my life before 25 doesn't really exist because the trauma is pretty much shocked it and just sent it straight to hell. Like, like they just don't really exist. I will get fragments here and there, but even then, like, those fragments, they feel like I'm watching a movie of my life in which I'm a character, but I don't really understand that character. And so that's kind of where that is. But for me, and because of all these trauma experiences and really not feeling safe and at home in my body, I didn't know who I was. And when we say the words I am, I think I am is the most powerful statement that we have in the history of the universe. Because whatever you say after I am is what you're bringing into reality, which is why I'm very careful when saying I am. And that's why I use, like, we've experienced versus I am, because then that reframes it and says, all right, this is something that's happened, you know, for you, for whatever lesson you need, versus I am this thing. So it really allows us to reframe how we're thinking about ourselves as a human being. And so for me, it was a lot of, I had to get stable and secure. And for me, getting stable and secure means that I had to invite in a lot of vulnerability and allowing myself to trust people again. And it was a very, very, very slow process of how can I trust somebody? Because right now, all I know is that people have hurt, people have caused a lot of pain, people have done X, Y, and Z thing, and I don't feel safe in relationships with people. So I spent like a good, I don't even know, like most of my 20s being on my own, struggling with suicide, struggling with like drugs and pills and alcohol and just anything I could to numb just the unpleasant emotions that I did not want to have to fucking deal with. And so and we call these the quote unquote best years of your life, they were the worst years for me. But in hindsight, they were also the best years because they allowed me to grow into who I am now. So, you know, it was a beautiful lesson in that regard. But I spent so much of those 20s just trying to figure out, how do I get comfortable with people? How do I get comfortable with myself? And even if you had known me like 3 years ago, the person I am now versus the person I was 3 years ago, complete fucking opposites. Mm-hmm. And really, it was my understanding and my walking into my gender journey that allowed me to really understand who I was as a person. And so how this happened was Michael was working over at the Hudson Pride Center and had these things called Vogue Balls. And I remember going to this Vogue Ball. And Vogue Balls, if y'all have not seen Pose on FX or anything like that, that's kind of what Vogue Balls are. They're a real big safe space for especially the Black community to really, you know, find community and find their space of connection, which is why I feel this is so beautiful. And so for me, it was a moment of going into this Vogue Ball, and I saw these people just strutting down the runway and their sequins and their stilettos and these really just fabulous fucking outfits. And it was a moment of, not that I just appreciate those, I want to wear those. I want to embody all of that. And I was like, I don't understand what this is. I don't understand what the fuck is happening. And I didn't have the language to really understand what gender nonconforming was, what, you know, being gender non-binary, like all these things. I didn't have that language. And so Michael and I went back to his house, and Michael, Josh, and I kind of sat on the couch and we watched, I think it was Lisa Ling, Our America, on something on gender. And we were watching it. And I'm actually starting to get teary-eyed now because this still brings me so much joy and gratitude, because this is the moment where I finally realized this is who I was. And I was just sitting there on the couch, and I just remember just staring at this, watching this video, and I was like, this is me. This is the piece of me that I didn't know existed. And the moment I watched that, the moment I finally understood, it was like this light bulb went off and I just felt myself expand. I finally felt a piece of connection with myself in a way that I hadn't understood. And it was that moment of really figuring out what my identity was, that I was like, oh, I feel safe again. I feel at home again. And so that's why I started really getting back into yoga. And so like the spiritual piece of me has always been there. I know it's always been there. But I didn't really have access to it, and I lost access to it over a while because the trauma experience has gotten in the way. But as I've gone through like yoga and tarot and astrology and Reiki and all these other things, these are things that I grew up with. As I've talked with a little bit more people that knew me back then, like it was an understanding of these things have always been a piece of you and you just kind of lost contact with them. And the moment that I found that connection with my body through my gender, I was able to understand this is how I connect with my body again. And the moment I did that, I started realizing how I move in the world impacts other people. And so it's been this like accelerated journey of coming home to myself and going, I feel safe and comfortable here. And so as I've done this, that's also allowed me to also teach other people and to like really guide people into their own understandings and how you're showing up in the world. What are the ways that we talk about each other? How do you talk to me? How do I talk to you? How do we talk together? How do we talk with each other? And it's just been this really great journey of figuring out like, all right, let's talk about how we can make you great. How are we doing this?
Let me tell you something. As I from a distance have watched that, because I've known you for a couple of years. It's just that we haven't been close for a couple of years, but
Right.
I've known you. And like, even, I mean, like you said, it's about like, so that was like the body piece for you. It's like this awareness that of how you show up physically. Sometimes we get into these conversations and it's like all very like high level, but it's
Right.
not just high level, because all of that translates to how you're literally physically showing up every day. And I love how you made that connection, because that's what I see right away when I see you. I see that vessel that you're in. I see how you show up. I see how you present. I feel your energy. And that's the way we connect and influence each other. And you've been an inspiration to me in that way, because even just, you know what I mean? Like just feeling that energy, just watching you bloom and unfold. And I mean, in all honesty, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that story, first of all, but it's true. Like this is a perfect example of the way that we can uplift each other and heal each other by healing ourselves. Because I can feel you healing. I can watch you do it. I see you visually and physically. I can see you bloom. And it is going. So, if you're thinking to yourself, all I do is worry about the health of my children. All I do is worry about the health of my parents. All I do is I give, because we're also programmed to do that. Right. And it's like, what about, it's a perfect segue, honestly, to like this concept of self-care and like filling your own cup. It's like,
Right.
you are going to literally heal the fucking world by healing yourself.
Right.
And this is an example, because you set an example, especially that concept of coming home to yourself and being true to yourself and living that embodiment, showing up with that every single day. You will literally encourage people to embody their own truth just by doing that. It is fucking massive. Thank you. Like,
Thank you
thank
for that. Yeah, it's
you.
been a huge fucking journey. And I think it's that coming home to yourself where you realize that like I'm safe and I'm secure here. And then because you feel so safe and secure, for me at least, it's like, how can I also transform and transcend my own reality to make sure that becomes a reality for somebody else?
Yeah. That's the next level, right? Is like, okay, holy shit, like you have this enlightening experience or spiritual awakening or whatever the fuck we want to
Right.
call it, right? And then you get to that next level where you're like, I have to help somebody do this.
Right.
And that's why, that's when that you found your purpose. You're doing your purpose work. Like, you're here. We're all here. We're all just one little wave that rose up out of that vast, massive ocean. That's all it is. So like, we are connected in that way, which means that we're here for each other. We're not
Right.
here just to be a drop and then disappear. We're here for each other.
Right.
So happy right now. I know you got to go, so I'm gonna bring it on home. Any final thoughts you want to share? Like anything that's like, wait a second, I forgot this, or like something that you feel maybe somebody who's listening needs to hear. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you're like,
Right.
oh, like I'm getting something.
Right. Well, the thing I'm getting is patience. Because this is a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And I know that, and, you know, in the space of this hour that we've talked about this as something that's been this huge, like this big, huge moment. And I want to remind all that this has been a years long journey for me. This is not something that happened overnight. This is not something where, you know, I flipped a switch and I was quote unquote better and I was happy and living my fulfilled life. No, there was tons of backsliding where I fell back into those old patterns and old habits I was learning and trying to figure out what this looks like. So allow yourself, permit yourself to have patience and to give yourself some grace in this process and to know that you are worth moving through this healing journey and to know that you are deserving of this healing journey and to love yourself a little bit harder, to laugh easier, and to just give yourself all the love, the joy, the pleasure that you need and that you deserve, because it's a process and it's going to take time. And find people that you can get to support you in this journey, because there are going to be times where it's not easy. But just the word that's coming is just have patience and you will get there. I promise you.
Yeah. It's so important. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Even for me, it's like that. I thought I've been, you know, my process is like 5 years in at this point.
Right.
Longer than that. And the whole time I thought, I was just saying this to someone, like the whole time I thought that I was in the process of healing.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, I was just preparing myself for the realization of the real things that I needed to heal.
Right.
Like I was fully in, you know, like, oh, you know, like I'm in the coaching world and I got my mindset work going and I got this and I'm a yoga instructor. And then it's like, oh no, all I was doing was coming to a really pure place of self-awareness that took that long to realize what I really, really needed to heal.
Right.
And it takes time. So it can be daunting, but I agree 100% patience. We got plenty of time. We got
Right.
plenty of time, you know? I love you. Thank you so much. We'll probably do this again because I can't believe, like, I feel so good about how, like, we just go back and forth. I think I knew that though. Like I knew that.
Yeah. I'm easy to talk to most days of the week.
Exactly. I try to be. Yeah. No, you absolutely are. You absolutely are. You're a damn gem and I'm keeping you. And that's the end of it.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
Don't care. I mean,
I
I
know.
feel like we have to point out the synchronicity of that right? I promise I didn't even think about it until we hopped on. I'm like, oh shit. All right. Very good. Thank you so much. I'm gonna put all of the information in the show notes, in the captions for all of everything that I publish on this. I'm gonna put all the information about where to find Zephyr so you can follow him. He has a podcast called Misfit Mondays. We can't forget to mention that.
Oh yeah, that little
thing. Yeah. So that's big too. But then your offering of House of Zeph, go find him on Instagram. But we'll put all that in the show notes. That way everybody can find you. Thank you again. Have a lovely rest of your weekend. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Everybody who's listening, you're gonna tell us what you think of this episode, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, love.
Thank you.
Bye.